Hello and welcome back to the Historical Humans Podcast. My name is Justin Woods and I'm joined today by Colum Coleman. Unfortunately, Gwendolyn is not feeling up to par today, so we are going to just continue on and we hope you feel better, Gwen. Today we're going to take things a little bit different. We're going to jump all the way back to North America and talk about the Louisiana Purchase, one of the largest land purchases the United States made. And correct me if I'm wrong, Colum, but this is also one of the first ones, correct?
This is the first land purchase the United States makes. It sets the precedent for all the other ones that they make, and many consequences that come from that. But we'll get there eventually. Right now we need to start with just the Louisiana Purchase and figure out, just what exactly Louisiana was at the time.
Oh, so what you're saying is we're going to need to do a pre-purchase inspection.
Yeah. Something the United States government most definitely did not do when they signed this treaty.
Yeah, but they did do a post-purchase inspection, and we'll get to that.
Yeah. All right. So let's bring us down right here with the history of Louisiana, as it is known. Not always just this one tiny little state in the American South.
I was going to say, we might want to clarify that specifically for our non-American viewers or those who aren't geographically gifted. The Louisiana Territory was significantly larger than the state of Louisiana and actually encompassed, I believe it was 10 or 11 states in total. So it was a pretty sizable chunk of land.
Yes, it was. It was enough to double the size of the contiguous United States of America at that time, and it held 13 states.
13. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it had 13 states, 8 of which it held the entirety of, and the remaining 5 were mostly within the bounds of this territory, but they would get a little bit extra later on.
Yeah, you always got to embellish the trades just a little bit, add just an extra smidgen more.
Yeah. You know a thing or two about embellishment with how you described Americans. Unique ways to say an American a minute ago there.
Look, okay.
Graphically challenged. Okay.
Yeah. Let's go back to the pre-purchase of the history. Like, who claimed it? Where did it come from?
All right. So the first instance of Louisiana being Louisiana occurred on the 9th of April in the year 1682, when France claimed the undefined Louisiana Territory. As an explorer named Robert Cavalier decided to lay claim to what is now the city of New Orleans, in the name of King Louis XIV of France. He did this by building a cross at the mouth of the Mississippi River and shouting at Native Americans.
Okay, so that precedent got started real early on.
Yeah. It does not get better for the Native Americans from here on out. I'm just warning you, our viewers in the audience. Things do not get better with time.
No, they get worse. They get so much worse.
Yeah. The next major development in this claim is in 1718. A man named Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne built the city of New Orleans at about where he thought Cavalier had proclaimed the existence of Louisiana. And he named the city for a man named Philippe, who was the Duke of Orleans and the regent of France at the time.
That's kind of a clever way to do it. Like, this is New Orleans in honor of the Duke of Orleans. Instead of giving it those dated names because the dukes come and go, the titles transfer, but no, you pay homage to the entire lineage.
Yeah. Translation. I'm going to kiss your ass and or the ass of your successor because it's going to take me 8 months to figure out whether or not you're still alive. Yes, travel across the Atlantic was really that slow.
Yeah, it took a minute, and there There's other interesting facts about New Orleans and the lack of traveling, specifically with regards to the War of 1812.
We're not there yet.
No, that is way
Okay.
too far.
Yeah. In fact, that's all the way past the purchase. So we don't technically have to deal with it, but we can. All
Ah,
right. So let's bring us through the rundown, the history.
yeah.
France then managed to lose the entirety of Louisiana to the Spanish in 1762 by essentially being on the wrong side of the 7 Years' War, which is also known as the French and Indian War in the United States.
Yeah.
I learned of it there. Um, the France decided to cede the territory over to the Spanish as a means of making peace with that country, and because the French regarded the very much underexplored territory as something of little value beyond just the prestige of look at all this land I own. And it seemed to them at the time as a pretty inexpensive way out of the war. Though, how 828,000 square miles of land can ever be considered inexpensive, I do not know.
Yeah, but then they did put some use to it. Like after the French got that piece of land, they used it as the breadbasket for their other colonies. They would grow all the wheat and food here in the United States or in the Louisiana territories, as
Yep.
it was
As
known
it is
back then,
known.
and would then ship it off to other more profitable colonies that may have
Mhm.
been a little bit smaller. Like France was really big on sugar cane, right?
Yeah. Yes, France liked Caribbean islands. They liked Caribbean islands that produced plantation crops. Um, they were very fond of all the things that come with a plantation lifestyle,
Like
which is to say,
exploiting,
slavery.
yeah, I was gonna say
And
exploiting minority
and
labor.
yeah. And when all you're really looking for out of your colonies is money, the colony that makes bread tends not to be the profitable one.
But what about the saying the breadwinner?
That's not how that works. Go make a short about it.
Oh,
I've
low
given you
down.
homework. I've given you homework for your sass now. Um, uh,
But like one of the big ones that um, France had and that they really put a lot of effort in was Haiti, and which was known as Saint Domingue, and you know, right around the time they decided to sell the the entire Louisiana territory, I I think there might have been a little bit of an event happening there.
yeah, yeah. So that's going to bring us up to the Louisiana Purchase right here. See, Spain holds on to this territory for about 40 years before France gets it back in the Treaty of San Ildefonso in 1801. Now no longer a monarchy, France has undergone the bloody French Revolution and is now a republic under the command of one first consul Napoleon Bonaparte.
Ah,
uh,
yes,
a
with a
very
dictator.
even-headed and peace-loving democratic guy. I can't keep lying like this, guys.
Which, talking about the shorts, I did do one talking about how Napoleon lost a battle against 3,000 rabbits.
Yep. When you're fighting a war on a rabbit, you know you've lost your mind.
Well, how else do you celebrate the victory against the Imperial Russians? Then you go on a rabbit hunt of
I don't know.
domestic
Kill a bear.
rabbits. Anyways, but yeah, so he decides to sell the land, and
Yep. 1803, the Louisiana Purchase is put underway as Napoleon decides that he kind of really doesn't want Louisiana. He wants money.
well, and one of the reasons why they were selling it, as was alluded to earlier, was Haiti was in the middle of a rebellion and seemed liable to be lost. So if you're going to lose the main money winner and you were purely just had this land to supply the bread and the food for this bread or for this moneymaker, if you're going to lose the moneymaker, you're not going to really be interested in providing food. So to them, this land felt expendable or like not needed.
Yep. Yeah. Additionally, the French government was a bit strapped for cash. They had just gone through a violent revolution and were currently eyeing up the island of Great Britain to replace their diminishing colonial empire. And wars take money. Wars take lots of money.
So they turn to the U.S. and go, "Hey, you want to buy this piece of land?" And the U.S., well, specifically, what is it? Monroe.
Yes, future President James Monroe.
He
Uh,
took the spearhead as the negotiator, and France came in asking for a whopping $22.5 million at the time, but
yeah,
Monroe was a shrewd negotiator.
he got it down. It was brought down to $15 million, which, fun fact, was still more money than the entirety of the United States Treasury in 1803.
So they didn't have enough money to buy it, but they wanted it. So
They didn't have
what
enough
can
money
you
to buy
do?
it, but they agreed to pay for it.
What would you do if you didn't have enough money to buy something?
I don't know, Justin. What do you do?
You take out a loan.
Yay. And
And
thus began America's steady advance of sound financial decisions and always balancing the budget.
of course, of course. And what better way to take out this loan than to go back to our good old buddies, the British, and they purchased the bonds from the British Bank Baring and Co.
Yep.
So they ended up borrowing money from a British bank to pay France for a piece of land in the New World so
Yep.
France can use the money to go off to war
Yep.
against the British.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. This treaty, yeah. Yeah, this treaty does get complicated simply because it, unlike most treaties, it's not a single agreement like you would conceive of a treaty. It's three separate agreements. One treaty of secession that allows for the transfer of the Louisiana Territory from France to United States, and two separate agreements regarding exactly how France is going to get paid and when.
Which, speaking of the bond, the U.S. Actually got a pretty decent deal out of it. They financed the money over 15 years at 6%. So, I mean, that's slightly higher than you would see on like modern loans. Definitely a lot cheaper than student loans, for sure.
It's relatively tame.
Yeah. So, I mean, for a fledgling nation to double its size and to be able to purchase this land for and effectively solidify its western borders,
Yep.
because you don't want the pesky French in your backyard. We learned that the hard way.
Yep. Yeah, and this $15 million that the U.S. spent on this purchase here, uh, that the very famous adage is that the land sold to the United States at a rate of 4 cents for an acre,
Wow.
which is, yeah, which is absolutely absurd. We did a little math here behind the scenes, and in 1803, the purchase amounted to $18.12 US dollar per square mile of territory, which translates to $2021, which is the last year in which the data is in for all of inflation and all the little ticking up and down that the economy does. 454.85 USD per square mile.
So it went from $18.12 per square mile to 454
Yeah,
with inflation
yeah,
and everything.
yeah.
Wow.
$18 in 1803 is worth $454 in 2021.
Which another good thing to point out is that $15 million, if you talk about it in 2021 dollars, is $376,000,000, $614,159.30.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as it's also known, your average rich person's house.
Yeah, so your billionaires, your multimillionaires could afford this and could easily. God, that amount of land is just absurd to have over 800,000 acres of land.
It boggles the mind, Justin. My mind is boggled.
And the other interesting thing is, I wonder when they did the land patents on this, when the Bureau of Land Management and the Homesteader Act, I genuinely wonder they must have made a return on investment, because to get the homesteading and to pay the fees, I guarantee it was more than 4 cents an acre, 100%.
Oh yeah, definitely. That is a large part of why one of the reasons why that Homesteader Act was able to make affordable housing out in places like what is now today Kansas and other states carved from Louisiana Purchase, because the U.S. bought the land at a rate of 4 cents an acre. They're selling it to you at a rate of maybe $10 an acre. That's over $9 of profit. That's absurd.
$9.94 of profit, or 96 cents of profit.
That
is not just like a 10% or 100% or even 1,000% profit margin. That is, for once, maybe the U.S. made a good
levels
business.
Of greed.
Yeah.
That is Walmart and Disneyland levels of greed, like full on inside Disneyland. You're already trapped. Here's a $30 hot dog.
What is our profit margin? How many zeros? Okay, yeah, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, profit margin, all of it. All of it, yeah.
Just a pure vertical graph.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, but so now, to bring us back to front.
So there is some interesting quirks about the treaty we should go into, as we are now finally at the actual 1803 Louisiana Purchase. So not only so there was a one little fun quirk about the fact that this took place in 1803, and that is that, well, the treaty was signed, and for several months it was not legal, despite having all the necessary signatures on it, because according to U.S. law, the treaty has to go before the United States Senate and be approved. And it takes time to carry a printed document across the Atlantic.
Remember how we were talking about that 8-month travel time?
Yeah. So Monroe and Livingston essentially signed a treaty on behalf of the United States government, obliging the United States government to do something that the United States government technically did not agree to do.
However, our quite notable historians out there may note that Monroe did have some permission to go out there and negotiate.
Yeah, he had the order from the president to head to France and help the ambassador to France, a man named Livingston.
Robert Livingston.
Yes, there's his first name. To help Livingston negotiate a payment for the city of New Orleans. And instead, he bought all of Louisiana for $5 million, more than he was allowed to spend.
Which, to be fair, the reason why New Orleans would have been worth $10 million is of its location on the Gulf of Mexico, at the mouth of the Mississippi, major trade corridors, especially in this time frame where boats were huge to do.
Yeah. And at the time of this treaty, the United States western border was the Mississippi River, so a lot of trade flowed down from places like Illinois and all those other states.
Yeah, down the Ohio River into the... A lot of trade was based on the river, a lot of choke points, and it was one of the main travel corridors with anywhere. And when France had control, or when Spain had control of it, they charged tariffs and fees for going through there.
Well, actually, they tried to, and then the U.S. made them not. As there is as there was an agreement from 1795 that essentially amounted to United States merchants can house their goods in the city of New Orleans, and then United States ships can come into the docks and load up on those goods, effectively making it a functioning free port for United States shipping, which was vital to the United States as New Orleans was the only remaining outpost on the Mississippi that the United States didn't control or have a way past.
Yeah, so it was quite important, but when you're making a negotiation and you're having a conversation and you have your budget, but then you get a counter offer for only a little bit more to just double your land size. It's understandable why you can't say no to that.
Yeah, and the United States Congress did agree with Monroe uh, as the Senate approved of the treaty, I should say, by a vote of 24-7, which seems appallingly small by today's standards. But imagine that, 31 senators.
Yeah, but to be fair, the union was a lot smaller. The amount of states that were admitted were a lot smaller. But yeah, 24/7. When was the last time we had a politician work 24/7?
Never. That only happened once. It'll never happen again.
But that's a pretty significant margin if you were to extrapolate it further.
Yep. That is it is more than 3-1. So it was essentially a widely popular acquisition,
Hey,
which
if we were to use modern standards, that 3-1, you're talking that passes majority.
that definitely passes. That definitely passes any majority standard. Passes a greater majority standard as it represents more than 3/4 of the vote. That actually brings the bill. That approval brings the bill to the desk of President Thomas Jefferson, who had a bit of an interesting conundrum regarding this treaty. See, Thomas Jefferson was what was known at the time as had a strict legalist interpretation of the Constitution, which amounts to if it is not expressly written in the United States Constitution, the United States government cannot do it. And nowhere in the United States Constitution is it written how the United States government may buy land from a foreign country.
Which, to be fair,
there's nowhere where it's written down how to do that.
that's a very unique conundrum too, because there's not many times that countries willingly sell and trade land like that. I mean, it happens with colonies and with exclaves sometimes, but a lot of times it's war. It's some violent means of land acquisition and transfer.
Yeah. The exception to this is most of the territories gained by the United States in the entire 19th century.
Hey, at least we were buying that.
Because this little document here set a precedent that the United States proceeded to essentially go ham with.
Well, our entrepreneurial
to use a legal
spirit.
term, of course.
But that's interesting, and
Yep. And so this set a major precedent about the implied powers of the presidency and what a president could and could not authorize, because Congress essentially decided to rubber stamp the treaty rather than create an amendment allowing for the treaty to exist and then let Jefferson rubber stamp it. They just said, no, we're good with this. We like this idea.
that I think it should be an important footnote here too for all of our Hamilton fans out there.
Hamilton.
that during this period and during this point in the United States, there was a huge argument of federalist or anti-federalist government. How much power does the government innately have? And one of the arguments as such is that Congress and the president cannot act beyond the Constitution.
Yeah. That lasted about as long as it lasted just under 30 years as this essentially throws that under the bus.
Although, to be fair, some descendants of that argument are still being made to this day. Descendants of it, not the same argument, but descendants.
Not the same argument. Yeah, it the very much, I believe, anti-federalist faction kind of lost a lot of steam when the anti-federalist president went and, well, did something very, very federalist, which is not, aka not strictly interpreting the Constitution and saying, "Oh, I'd love to buy this wonderful territory full of wealth and land and things we need, but it's not written in this document I signed, so I won't."
But the document that was signed, one of the biggest downfalls of it was the land was not that well defined for it
No.
being a legal document. It was just like you'd have this property.
Yeah. So, yeah. Fun fact. You remember how France got? We may have mentioned that France got the Louisiana Territory back from Spain in 1801 in the Treaty of San Ildefonso. Well, it's only 1803, and travel and communications are somewhat slow. France still doesn't know what's in the Louisiana Territory or what the term Louisiana Territory fully entails. That hasn't been settled yet. So the U.S. buys Louisiana Territory. Guess whose job it is to figure out what's in the Louisiana Territory?
Like I said, post-purchase inspection.
United States. Yeah.
Um,
There was the United States, evidently, when they acquired this territory, had some understanding that the states of Florida and Texas were also included in it. Spain did not agree. This dispute went on all the way to 1819, when the U.S. decided to shell out a further $5 million to buy the state of Florida and acknowledge that Spain had sovereignty over Texas. I'm certain that the keener historians among you will note that that agreement lasted for many centuries and is ongoing to this day.
I would like to put a huge flashing disclaimer here. That was sarcasm.
It's not. I am being quippy today. It did not last long.
I mean, effectively, what, the Republic of Texas was, what, 1848? Something like that? Or is that when it dissolved? It didn't last very long.
The Republic of Texas began in 1836 and ended in 1846. So this agreement in 1819 bought Spain all of 17 years of the U.S. acknowledging their sovereignty.
Well, and then,
Way to go, Spain.
Texans do Texan things.
Yeah.
So they like you said, a president was set. So then they're like, that marshland, that little tip thingy on just south of Georgia, that might be a decent little purchase.
Yep. So they gobbled up Florida for that $5 million in 1819, and they would continue to gobble up money, territory, in that manner for a very, very long time.
Yeah, but $5 million, and now we've got Florida man. Who really won that trade?
We don't talk about Florida man. He's not real and cannot hurt us.
Oh, you sure about that? Well, and then kind of briefly bouncing back to Monroe, he did become the 5th president of the U.S. in 1817 to 1825. So, the time frame of that Florida purchase just kind of falls into an interesting little pocket.
He's finishing what he started.
God. Monroe and his doctrines.
Yep. That. I'm not dealing with that. I'm not dealing with that today. That is a whole nother set of legalese that I am not going to get into. So now that we have Louisiana, let's look at what it was. It was 828,000 square miles, stretching from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada and from the Mississippi River all the way to the Rocky Mountains. It was massive. As we mentioned earlier, 13 United States were formed from this lovely new purchase.
Can I say the list? Can I say the list?
All right, let's go through the states.
Arkansas, Iowa, Louisiana, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, and then it also had just a teensy little bit of
Oh, it had,
Colorado, a little bit
not a
of
little bit. It
Kansas.
had most of the other
Shh,
states.
I'm embellishing, Column.
Majority. It had the majority. You're embellishing the wrong way. You're minimizing.
Okay, well, it had most of Colorado, Kansas, Montana, and Wyoming. And, the first one to really gain their freedom from that purchase was Louisiana. And they became a state in the year 1812.
Yep. It was only the 18th U.S. state at the time, so
And no other major historical events happened in 1812 that
don't
involved
talk
more.
about that, dear. It never happens. We are Americans. We refuse to acknowledge ever being on the losing end of a war.
Hey, but we did win the Battle of New Orleans. Don't you remember our good old buddy?
I'm not. No, we are not doing Andrew Jackson Day. Christ's sake.
But the cool thing about this is the land that they got, or not a cool thing because it caused a lot of issues later on, but the land was rich in minerals. It had a lot of gold, a lot of silver. I mean, true to my heart, as my picture here, if anyone may recognize, is the Black Hills of South Dakota, which rose to prominence when they discovered gold. And, we'll touch on it a little bit later, but the Black Hills was an area that the U.S. realized was very valuable and that was not properly utilized by its original inhabitants. We're making light of the situation. In reality, the land was stolen from a lot of the indigenous communities that lived out there, and it was purely based on the fact that there was gold. There was money to be made.
Yeah, the land had an abundance of natural resources that were relatively untapped and unexploited. Lots of forest for lumber, lots of plains for farming and grazing and ranching, and lots of gold and silver ore in all the mountains.
And kind of true to my heart, because with my master's thesis, I actually did focus quite a bit on this. But what we were joking about previously was the post-purchase inspection, which everyone knows as the Lewis and Clark expedition, which was helmed by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. And it lasted from 1803 to 1806, and it was also known as the Corps of Discovery Expedition. And what this was a team of explorers went starting in St. Louis, ended up working their way up the Missouri River, up through Missouri, past Kansas, through Nebraska, all the way up to South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, following that into the mountain ranges, and then they ended up following the Columbia River down to the Pacific Sea. They basically wanted to see how big the territory was, how much land encompassed it, and there's quite a few notable tales from the adventure as well, but for me, I focused on relocating some of the sites that they talked about and how a lot of the archaeologists who studied those sites had some very problematic views, but I don't know if I'll go that far into it.
The time for that's a video for another time. If you want to hear some more from the Lewis and Clark expedition, we do have an H.H. Reed's coming out on Friday with an excerpt from one of their journals.
Yes.
So I can look forward to that.
On March 25th at 12 o'clock Central, we will have that dropping.
Yep.
So, as we tend to do a lot of times with these podcasts, we have companion videos that are on our YouTube channel. A shameless plug to go over there and check them out if you haven't been over there so far.
Yes, please go and feed the View Goblin. It very much awaits your presence.
Which we have the YouTube Shorts, Columns, Reads. There's a couple of good things to check out on there.
There's several things on there, and we'll be expanding more in the future, hopefully.
But one of my favorite things, Column, is actions tend to have consequences, and certain consequences have ramifications. Yeah. So we teased a little bit earlier with the Florida Purchase, but what other dominoes fell because of this?
Well, aside from the Florida Purchase, which was also called the Transcontinental Treaty and the Adams-Onis Treaty, for those of you who want to look it up by its more proper names, in 1819. So aside from that, it continued on with a couple other purchases that bought out the rest of the contiguous United States of America. The last of these was the Gadsden Purchase in 1954, which bought out from Mexico the southern boundaries of the states of Arizona and New Mexico for the United States. Now, this is not the last time that the United States will buy territory from another nation. The United States bought Alaska from the Russian Empire in 1867. But this is the solidification of the continental United States.
So, for a nation that really set the precedence with buying and selling land, they really became real estate developers, so to speak, because they bought undeveloped parcels of land and they built cities and towns and infrastructure in them and displaced all the indigenous inhabitants. But to increase your land size from just the original continent, like the 13 colonies, all the way to encompassing the entirety of the contiguous United States, like, that is impressive. Now, I'm curious as to what the total cost has been for all of the land purchases, because they've all been in the millions. There hasn't been a super expensive one so far.
Yeah. Well, going through line by line for you, we can keep up a little tally here. Louisiana Purchase was $15 million.
Okay.
The Florida Purchase was $5 million.
20 mil.
So then there were several other territories. The Mexican, no, not get off my screen. I apologize for my technical difficulties. So the Gadsden Purchase was another 15 million.
So 35.
If I'm reading right. No, I'm sorry. The Gadsden Purchase was another 10 million.
Okay, so off. 30 mil.
I need to read. The Mexican Cessation, which acquired Nevada, Utah, most of Arizona, and California, was another 15 million.
Okay, 45.
Then the Alaska Purchase was 7.2 million.
Wow.
Yeah, oh. That one was cheap.
God,
that one was a doozy. Russia had written off Alaska as a drying up fur trade industry and didn't quite realize that there was gold in them hills.
And not to mention, in modern times, there's a lot of black gold up there too.
Yep. And that is about it for states. However, the U.S. does continue to spend money to acquire territories. We spent $20 million to purchase the Philippines from the Spanish in 1898. We bought control of the Panama Canal for $10 million with a $250K a year tax on it. We bought out the Danish Virgin Islands for $25 million. We bought Water Island for $10,000.
Interesting.
And we pay $3,300 in rent every year to Cuba for the use of Guantanamo Bay. Bastion of freedom that is. So the U.S. does a lot of money deals.
Interesting. Okay, so that's still really not a crazy amount of money. That's still what, right around 100 mil, if that. Maybe I'm fluffing the numbers just a touch, but that's a good deal. I mean, you're talking, people pay, 700-800 million for sports franchises. You're not telling me that someone's gonna buy an entire.
Yeah. So it's $107,210,000 US over the course of 131 years, plus $253,386 in annual rent for the rights to access to other territories.
So I mean, in theory, that's what, 10 or 15 million dollars. Not even. That's what, $6 or $7 million a year. That's not bad. You said the 160 years or 130 years.
131 years,
And
$107 million.
Wow,
131
so that's
years,
a lot less.
$107 million. Yeah.
Yeah, 1.22 million. So I was way off with my number. I was trying to overpay, but $1 million, 200,000 a year for all that land. Not bad. Not a bad deal at all.
Yeah.
As we ranted on for 5 minutes here about the cost of land.
Yes. Yes. All right. To get us away from this horrid conversation of land purchasing, this lovely little Louisiana Purchase had some more unintended consequences for the United States. For one thing, it exposed a lot of the existing internal divisions of the United States of America, particularly along the free state, slave state lines between the North and South.
That's a hard line, Colum. Going from buying land to buying
people.
Yes.
Just say it. Just say it. They're people.
Yeah,
they're
people. Slavery.
They are purchasing human beings.
But one of the reasons for that is the debate of, well, do these new states, do we let them continue on, or do we draw a line and say, okay, this is...
Yeah. There was it sparked a big debate as to whether or not slavery would be allowed in these new states that were being formed from the Louisiana Territory. Well, the United States tried to smooth over those issues, first with the Missouri Compromise in 1820, which was the idea of maintaining an equal number of slave and free states in the United States. This effectively means that if you want to admit a new state as a free state, you also have to admit another state that allows slaves.
Yeah.
This compromise came about as a result of Missouri attempting to join the Union as a state in 1820. And Missouri was allowed to join as a slave state, provided that Maine became a free state at the same time.
Because balance is key.
Yeah,
they're basically trying to avoid flipping the scale on one side or another.
Yeah, essentially, rather than resolve the problem, they decided that if we can just maintain status quo, we'll all be fine. Spoiler alert, they will not all be fine.
They did make some... they did draw some lines, quite literally, at... they prohibited slavery north of 36 degrees north, 30 minutes line, right? Did I read that correctly?
3630 line in Louisiana Territory. Yeah,
I was trying to read it like an actual sextant and compass, and my directions are not there.
Yeah, it's okay. You don't got to read that.
But like most good things, this was repealed in 1854.
Yeah,
but with the Kansas-Nebraska Act.
The Kansas-Nebraska Act, and a Supreme Court case named Dred Scott versus Sanford deemed the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional, which effectively threw that out the window. And brought down, which brings us down to the next compromise on the list. The Compromise of 1850, so accurately named. This compromise dealt with the fact that the U.S. got some new territories following the Mexican-American War in 1848. Those territories being the ones paid for in the Mexican cessation. I want to say this right. I apologize. The Mexican cessation. So some of Wyoming, some of Colorado, some of New Mexico and Arizona, and the entirety of Utah, Nevada, and California all suddenly belong to United States. What do we do with this?
Yeah.
Well, we don't do anything good.
Well, I mean, depending on who you ask. I was going to say, we did admit California as a free state. That was kind of big, but
no.
Yeah, to some people, California is evil. So,
California became a free state. We acknowledged the Republic of Texas as sovereign, and we increased the penalties surrounding the Fugitive Slave Act so that any person suspected of being a slave or former slave uh, was to be arrested and deported to the South into slavery. And any person found harboring said slaves faced increased fines and jail time. You know, because your employee is black and you pay him.
yeah, there's a lot of issues with this, and I think there's a fine line too because a lot of this stuff culminated in the Civil War, which unfortunately we talk about at length in private, but like there's this whole misconception that the Civil War was not about slavery, but no, it was.
It's
It
in the freaking Constitution for the Confederacy.
and in every single letters of secession that every state made, it was clear and explicit that it was for the maintenance of the system of slavery.
Yeah. And we can thank the Louisiana Purchase for that catharsis, as the act of expansion put the strain on the institution of slavery to be abolished. And the southern states and all those lovely slaveholding states just wouldn't really stand for it.
Yeah, well, and as it's hard too. Like the institution of slavery, it was clearly on the way out before this became a whole to do, but then you have the people who monetarily were invested in it that were not. You're not willingly going to give up your monetary investment, and unfortunately,
Yep.
they chose to invest in human capital, and that's history told us that was wrong. Like
Yeah.
I say that because I feel like there's still some people that will try to justify it in some way, shape, or form, but it was just wrong.
It was wrong, and especially the racialized form of slavery that was going on in the United States.
Yeah.
That one was just extra. That one had some extra layers of evil added into it, like seasoning on some sort of evil pie.
Hmm. Not only are we
Yeah.
controlling this population, but they are also subordinate to us.
But yeah, and but yeah, the Louisiana Purchase really was the first domino in the line of essentially catalyst that led to the United States tearing itself apart over this issue.
Which, and the interesting thing too that I want to point out is not only was it the catalyst for the Civil War, but the Louisiana Territory was also one of the main places that a lot of indigenous folks ended up. The natives, because they had been pushed out, forced westward from American expansionism, and it caused quite a few series of conflicts because as the new white settlers were coming into the areas, they didn't want the indigenous around. The indigenous obviously are not going to be keen to having these people come into their lands, destroying their territories, killing their animals, and causing a ton of issues.
Well, should be pointed to bring you up. We talked, a lot earlier about the Treaty of Ildefonso and the 7 Years' War and the Louisiana Purchase itself, and all the sort of agreements that sort of went into the U.S. incorporating all this territory into its borders. Would you like to take a guess, Justin, since we're on the topic of Native Americans, as to who was not consulted as to the sovereign of this territory would be?
Well, okay,
Guess
let's
which group
go.
of people?
All right, give me a minute on this. I'm gonna think this one out. Well, we talked about the Spaniards, we talked about the French, we talked about the Americans. Heck, we even made an honorable mention to the British. But why wasn't any of the natives contacted about this? Like, there definitely seems to be a missing loop in that party.
Well, you're just a sovereign nation that lives there. You don't get to say who rules you. You're just your own nation.
Well, technically, France did not view them as a sovereign nation, and the
No
sovereign
one.
nation aspect of that came as a bunch of frivolous treaties that were signed, but that's
That's
another whole issue. Speaking of
that's
the Black
later.
Hills, like we could talk
That's
entirely
later.
about the land
That's
theft that
later.
took
Focus
place.
on the purchase. Focus on the purchase. Justin, you've
Well,
gone on way too mmany tangents as it is.
okay.
All right.
Sorry,
So
but
yeah,
yes, it's all related.
it
But
yeah. So this treaty it completely ignored anything that the Native Americans who lived on that land and in many cases had lived on that land for generations upon generations onto time immemorial. It just ignored their existence. uh, as this treaty brought a bunch of settlers from the United States over the Mississippi River. And, well, they just started building houses and claiming land. And, well, when someone just sort of walks up onto your property and starts building things there, you tend not to like that. And a lot of indigenous conflicts and wars resulted from this influx of American settlers brought about by the treaty.
one of the big ones that I did want to point out was the Dakota Wars, because they were probably some of the most violent, bloody wars on both sides. It's where the infamous Custer's Last Stand took place, which, yeah, good old George Custer, Civil War hero, got surrounded and overwhelmed by a bunch of indigenous warriors, and it highlights a series of things that the United States had did to indigenous folks, and yeah, it I can't understate how many problems came from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you mean overstate.
Yeah, no, either way, like I can't overstate nor understate it.
Clarify the words here.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Understate means that there were too little problems to mention. Overstate means there are too many problems to mention.
Okay, I didn't want to understate the severity of it. Is that a good way to put it?
There you go. English is hard, everybody.
Yeah. And it being native language, but the Louisiana Purchase really impacted and changed the course of the United States history, because like we talked about, it was the French's breadbasket for their colonies. The United States pretty much just resumed that activity, and if not industrialized it. They, like Colin mentioned, they homesteaded every aspect of it, and if it wasn't a farm, it was
lumber yards, ranches, mines, towns at various waypoints, fortresses, because you've got to secure this land from all those pesky people already living on it.
Well, also don't forget, a couple of years after the purchase, they did choose the area of Oklahoma as the place to send all of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, led to they referred to Oklahoma as Indian Territory, because that's, you take all your problems and you just put them in Oklahoma.
Yep. Oklahoma, America practicing for Liberia.
Which, another fun fact, kind of tangentially, but that's also why Texas, if you look on the old maps and everything, is a lot larger than what it is currently, is because at the top of the stovepipe where Oklahoma and Texas, the Panhandle, the reason the Panhandle exists is because Texas did not want to give up its ability to own slaves, and that went above that parallel that established the line.
Yep.
So Oklahoma got a free little panhandle out of it because Texas was too racist.
Yay, Texas. Yeah. So in summary, here, because we are coming in pretty well on time, right?
Yeah, we're a couple minutes short right now.
Yeah. So just in summary, to get all our facts in order and give us a nice little wrap up, the Louisiana Purchase is a series of 3 agreements between the United States and France that occurred in the year 1803 between the President Thomas Jefferson of the United States and First Consul Napoleon Bonaparte of France, that effectively ceded 828,000 square miles of land to the United States for the cost of $15 million and some wonderful British loans. This territory stretched from the Mississippi to Canada, from the Rocky Mountains to uh, the Gulf of Mexico. The territory would be divided into 13 states, and it set about the implied powers of the president and the executive branch as a whole. It undercut Native American sovereignty, territory, and rights, and it put increased strain under the or on the institution of slavery, I should say, that eventually culminated in the Civil War, as well as set precedent for the United States just buying territory off of other countries, more or less at will.
Yeah.
Occasionally, that will being a gun.
Sorry,
Spain.
It's a coercion tactic. It's not so much just it's buttering the bread a little bit. Threat of violence,
Yeah. Welcome to gunboat diplomacy, everybody. Please do not do it.
But I do think that this point right now would be kind of a good point to just kind of expand some of the other issues that took place beyond the treaty and that are in the Louisiana Purchase territories. Like, we did talk about the Black Hills and the some of the treaties that were made. The United States government, with a lot of indigenous tribes in the territory, made a lot of frivolous treaties that would effectively offer the tribe sovereignty, as Colum stated, of like, you are an independent nation, you are within your own control, but then would force them onto reservations, allotted pieces of land, really undercutting their ancestral homelands, a lot of which are sacred. So there's a lot of indigenous tribes that strongly advocate for their land back.
It's never going to happen, but they try.
I mean, technically, the United States government did award a sum of money for the Lakota for the Black Hills. However, in accepting the money, you accept the United States' claim that they now own the land.
Yeah. Like I said, they're never actually going to get the land back.
No. And a lot of people make the argument, like, just take the money and accept it, and it's the principle. It's the end of the day.
Yep. But I think that is our video on the Louisiana Purchase. Hopefully Gwen will be with us next time. And, I guess we'll run through what they can expect from us in the meantime.
Yes, Gwen, we miss you here, and we hope you're feeling better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Colum, you want to give them a heads up as to what you've got coming up here soon?
Sure. So the same week as this wonderful podcast goes live, on that Friday at noon, we will have up the Journal of Lewis and Clark for H.H. Reads. The week after that, we have a very special April 1st video from H.H. Reads called How Not to View Anthropology.
Whew, that's a spicy one.
That's a very fun one. After that, our next podcast will be on Fukushima.
Yeah, so we're taking a step into modern times, and we're talking about the nuclear disaster and the meltdown.
It is our first step into the 20th century on a podcast, and also our first visit to Asia.
21st century.
What did I say?
20th.
Listen, you called the bread basket a bride basket earlier. I'm not getting into this with you. Right. Accompanying that will be a reads from The Way of the Samurai by Inazo Nitobe. And the week after that will be Hermann Hesse Siddhartha.
So yeah, be sure to stay tuned for all of our H.H. Reads series. I know later this week we'll have a couple of interesting little shorts and TikToks that will be posted on our pages. One of which, I'll give a little spoiler here, is about a pope who declared war on cats. So, stay tuned for that lovely little one.
Yeah, I'm sensing a pattern of animals with you.
We love animals around here, but
turtles.
Of course, to tie everything all together. Just want to say thank you guys for watching us, and thank you for checking out the podcast and for supporting us this far. It's obviously hard to do it without Gwen here, but we're we're definitely trying to keep up with this and keep going. And if you guys could please check out our other social medias, everything will be linked in the show notes and in the description of the YouTube video. We've got a YouTube channel where we post videos of all of our content, from videos of the podcast to, like Colum mentioned, his reads, and even the shorts and TikToks make their way on there, to our Twitter page if you want to stay updated, our Discord if you want to have conversations with us. We hang out in the lounge and chat there every so often. You know, we want to make this as engaging as possible, and we want you guys to participate and be a part of this along with us, because history, as is so kindly often stated, if it goes unlearned, it's destined to repeat itself, and it's something that everyone should know a little bit about.
And with that too, please be sure to like or follow or subscribe on whatever platform you do enjoy listening to us on. It lets us know that that you do enjoy our content and does help us out immensely. So please be sure to hit the subscribe button to bring Gwen back.
Yes, please. We need her back.
Bring Gwen back and hit the subscribe button.
On that note as well, another announcement that we have is we are now live on Apple Podcasts under Historical Humans. So that is a huge improvement. We are now on another platform.
We don't have enough of them, apparently.
We're just trying to get it out to the masses. But if you guys did enjoy this, if you enjoyed our rants, our tangents, we're trying to carry the way to 3 here. Be sure to drop a like and check us out. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks for Fukushima.
Yep.